you have to realize that life, the thing that we call life, is just something that is caused by people, something that's made up by people before us that are no smarter or dumber than you. And once you realize that you can shape this thing that called life and mold it to how you like, there's so much more possibility that can open up.
And today we have Jason Lai. Jason Lai is a video creator and a full-time management consultant in London. He makes videos about personal development and career in management consulting. He started his YouTube channel.
And that's one reason why I do content creation, right? It's almost like to romanticize your life, because if you're just living your life day to day, it can often feel very boring and quite routine. But then when you edit them into like a short form content, you're almost looking at yourself from a third person point of view. It makes me quite grateful for where I am, what I'm doing at the moment. It makes me think that, hey, my life actually quite cool. It's not that bad. Post consulting content, and sometimes I don't have enough time to make it into a full YouTube video, so I started doing reels, and then like a few of them started doing really good. Now like my growth on Instagram is a lot quicker than on YouTube.
And in this conversation with Jason, we spoke about his perspective on creating both short-term and long-form videos on Reels and TikTok. We spoke about how he managed to find time for YouTube outside of work, as well as building great habits such as meditation and reading. And welcome to my conversation with Jason. Now here you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. So that was from the book Shoe Dog. You said it was one of your favorite books, and you made a reel about it. How does this quote inspire you in what ways?
I think the way that inspires me is that it's very visual. When you are sort of reading the quote in your head, the first part makes sense, right? Like if you want to keep up, just to keep up, there's like a bare minimum you have to do. And when everyone is doing that bare minimum, if you want to get ahead and get something out of life that is above average, you have to put in that extra mile. And I feel like that visualization just really stuck with me. And especially when I was reading the story of how Nike was founded, like I just felt like it was in a really good context, and it really made a lot of sense. So yeah, it just stuck with me. And I always remind myself, like, if you want to get anywhere in life, you probably have to run twice as fast.
Sarah, when was the moment when you realized you were running twice as fast or you were running not enough?
That's a good question, because I feel like it's cliche to say, but like life is a marathon. So you, even if you are running like twice as fast, you can't keep up that pace forever. And I feel like that's the same in life as well, right? Even you might have phases where you are running twice as fast and phases where you are falling behind. Right now, I think I'm running at a decent pace, but not as fast as I wish I can. And I think it's important to always just keep in mind, like, how fast you're running. Are you falling behind, or are you like running too fast? In the case that you'll burn up soon. So like, I feel like that's quite interesting as well.
So there's like a layer about being self-conscious of how fast you're running, just not like running like everybody that's beside you. And there's
Yeah.
another layer that's saying like life is a marathon. Like you obviously are gonna run faster, slower at different times, but then you are always trying to like I think there's like a thing called red line, which is like you're pushing hard to the point where you're almost burning out, but you're not burned out. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's ideal, right? But then in practice, it's really hard to always stay in that zone.
I see. How I wanted to rewind back a little bit. You have a very interesting background, and you and I actually both grew up in Hong Kong, but we haven't met until now. Like, how was it like growing up in Hong Kong and moving UK for university?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting transition. So just for like the background, I was born and raised in Hong Kong until I was 18, when I moved over to the United Kingdom for university/college. So in the first 18 years of my life, I would say I'm like a very, not traditional, but like I'm a person that follows a lot of the rules. Like I'm a good kid. Teachers like me, my parents like me, and that I'm never like a person that causes trouble. And that sort of mindset and frame framework of how life works sort of changes after I came to the UK. I started like having more free time. I started like reading different books, like 4 Hour Work Week, stuff like that. And it really opens my mind to like different kind of possibility that life isn't just what people tell you it is. It's almost like a Steve Jobs clip that I saw a while back where he mentioned like you have to realize that life, the thing that we call life, is just something that is caused by people, something that's made up by people before us that are no smarter or dumber than you. And once you realize that you can shape this thing that called life and mold it to how you like, there's so much more possibility that can open up. And that's when I started like deviating almost from like the traditional path. So I studied law in university, but
Mhm.
then after my first year, I was like quite dissatisfied from what it was doing, and I didn't want to become a lawyer. So I started like looking at alternative path while everyone was still like on the law path, trying to get law placement or internship, etc. So I came across different options. One of them being consulting, which sounded quite interesting. At that time, I was still like a bit on the fence. So I wanted to test out this like hypothesis that consulting is going to be more interesting. So like in my second year of university, I joined like the consulting club and like talked to consultants and like did some pro bono volunteering consulting project and really liked it. And that's when I decided to like fully switch track to consulting. And fast forward like 2, 3 years, I'm now working as a strategy consultant, which is what I wanted, I guess, like 2 years ago.
I wanted to say like what what does a law degree usually entail when you study at University of Durham in UK? Like what are typically the options people pursue and what were you thinking at the time?
Yeah, right. So I'll say when we first joined law school, the most popular choice will usually be corporate law. So corporate law being like the law that makes money, the law that you see in like suits, etc. That's a lot of people do end up in corporate law. There are a lot of people do end up just doing like non-law related stuff. So stuff like consulting, which I'm in right now, stuff like corporate finance, investment banking. Those are all like pretty, I won't say standard, but like those are the type of career that people tend to pursue if they don't pursue law. Because I think that higher education in the United Kingdom is still a lot more traditional compared to higher education in America. So a lot of people still usually ends up in like the traditional sort of prestige type of career path, which is like consulting, law, banking, etc.
I see. When you spoke about career paths, because that's interesting. When you were 18 applying to university in just the UK, and there's a thing called personal statements where you just have to like write about like basically like a essay about your life, extracurriculars, achievement, things like that. And you wrote that for three majors. Like not just law being one of them, but what are the other two and why did you choose them?
That's a very, very interesting question. So one of them being law. The second one was like media and communication, actually, which is like quite interesting. Interestingly, when you like connect the dots back, like I used to have like that sort of interest and passion in like media and like how you express yourself, and that's what I'm doing right now. Like I do content creation, which I guess we'll like dive into in a bit later. So that's like a second personal statement that I wrote. The third one was international relations. So I'm quite like a humanities person. I enjoy understanding how the world works. And I feel like I had a bit of an interest in like politics and international relation as well, which is why it was also one of the options other than media and law.
They were kind of rooted in like your interests, not just now, like back, like way back. Like let's say you born and raised in Hong Kong, moved to UK, exposed to different politics, international relations stuff, and with journalism as well, with your interest in media, which later manifested itself into what you're building now. So that's awesome. I think it's a good segue into the media field. Like I think you started in August 2020. You made your very first video. I think it was something about transitioning or adjusting for university. You were what? You were your second year?
Yeah.
How, like, what made you start posting online?
it was quite. It didn't happen all of a sudden. Like ever since I was quite young, I've always like watched YouTube quite a bit. So I remember when I was like 12, 13, I tried making video on like Minecraft and stuff, which I never posted because I thought they weren't good enough. So that's almost like a theme in my life. Like sometimes I'm a bit of like a perfectionist. I want to make sure things are right before I do it, which is why I think I procrastinated on doing content creation for so long because I wanted to make sure I knew all the strategy. I knew like the perfect timing to post, what's the best editing technique, I know my niche, etc. But after like so many years, I realized that you just have to start to improve. And in August 2020, I really started because of a few things. First, because of COVID, because no one was doing anything. Law school was relatively chill at the time. And I think it was the summer. I wanted something almost like a side hustle or like a side project to start. And obviously, YouTube is like one of the top priority because I've always wanted to try it. And the second reason being my girlfriend, who's still my girlfriend, um, really pushed me to start it because I've always had like a lot of self doubt, and in terms of whether I'm good enough or like in terms of being afraid of how people see me if I put myself online. But she really gave me a lot of like really supported me. She's really supportive and told me to just give it a try, and which is why I started that journey back in August 2020, which is almost 3 years now if you think about it.
Do you remember like the feeling when you press publish for the very first time about your university video? Like how did that feel like?
It was really scary actually. Even before I pressed the record button, even before I pressed the publish button, when I was recording, I remember it took me so long to just recording my first ever like YouTube video because I was so not used to speaking to the camera, and I was not sure like what kind of persona I have to put on. So that took a long time, and it took a long time to get over that fear, I'll say almost.
When you talk about like you have a lot of self-doubts, a lot of fear, and you talked about like you are afraid of how you're being perceived, what kind of personas that you want to put up to, is there what would you say is like the biggest fear that you had to overcome, and how kind of you think about it? How did you approach it?
I think one of the biggest fear which still happens, which still exists today, is the fear of like what people close to me, so sort of my friends, my close friends, etc., will think of me when they see me posting online. Because ever since I was quite young, I'm always like a very people person. I'm very sociable. Like I have quite a lot of friends in school, etc., and I was afraid that I may not be cool anymore if I start posting content online, which is something that I still fear sometimes, but
Hmm.
definitely not as much as I used to when I first started doing content creation.
Absolutely, it's a lot more gradual than you think. It's not like here's the fear, and now I start posting, and one day I would just overcome it. It's a very gradual feeling. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely, and I think you definitely improves in that as you become better at
Hmm.
doing content creation. Because in the beginning, it makes sense that you are embarrassed because you are trash at the content that you are posting are trash. But once you get better at it, once you stop feeling so cringy when you look at your own stuff, that's when that fear sort of starts to fade away, I'll say.
I see. And when you talked about getting better at making these videos, I wanted to ask you about how do you plan your videos?
Yeah, so I guess we can split this into YouTube and Instagram. So YouTube first, I guess. So ideally, the plan is that I have like a Notion tracker, which I still use sometimes. So there's like different columns, three different columns. One column being idea, second column being like stuff that I've recorded and editing, and the third column being stuff that I've completed and published. So basically, I'll just move and video from one column to the second to the third. So I always have like a column, a bank of ideas, a bank of things that I'm working on at the moment, and like my completed projects. So ideally, I always want to post once a week, but life happens. As you can see, I haven't posted in like a month maybe. But ideally, I try to post once a week, and that usually happens when the summer or like before I started my job, etc. And I'll say the video, like the process of how video came about is usually I just drop down random ideas I have and put it in the idea bank, as I mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'll usually, after finishing one video, I'll pick out an idea to make it my next video. And then, depending on the type of video, right? If it's a vlog, there's less scripting, but not more recording and editing. If it's like a talking head, like where I'm just talking to the camera, most of the time will be spent scripting, less time on actually the post production side of things. So let's just take in a talking head video, for example. I'll probably spend 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours scripting, and that 3 to 4 hours can be spread over multiple days depending on our workload.
Mm-hmm.
Then the recording will be relatively quick, actually 30 minutes to an hour. And the post production really depends on how long the video is, but usually I'll say like 5 hours perhaps, and that will be like one proper YouTube video.
Given that, like, how did you think about thumbnails and titles? Like when you were ideating them, you have them in the idea bank. Like, do you kind of have a picture of what the thumbnail, what the title looks like, or do you think about that in the post-production phase?
I try to always come up with the title and thumbnail before the video, but sometimes I slack off and I just wanted to like make it make the video before I do my thumbnail and title. In terms of how I do my thumbnail and title, there's a few ways I do it. So first of all, looking for inspiration from previous content done by other creator that has been doing quite successfully. So that's always a big one, even from like the pure ideation phase, like how I come up with an idea. A lot of times is looking at what other creator in similar niches have done and have done well before. So if those are the type of content I'm making, I'll usually make a pretty similar thumbnail/title. If it's a more sort of rogue or like a more sort of fresh idea that I didn't come up with through like looking at other creator, then the thumbnail and title process will be quite different. I wish I can say I have like a success formula, but I still don't yet. I feel like at this stage, my channel is still quite small. I think it's at like 1.3K or something at the moment. I think the thumbnail and title process is still a lot of experimentation at the time. So I still try to use different combinations of title and thumbnail just because I don't think I've found what works best at the moment. So a lot of time I still just look at like different creators and try different combination and see what works, I'll say.
Absolutely. And now, you said about YouTube first, and now I want to talk about Instagram. I guess before we dive into like how you plan your reels or your short form videos, how did you think about spending time on those two platforms when you
Yeah,
create streams?
very good question. I think this is something that I still struggle with because even though I've had my Instagram content creation account for a while, I've only really started doing it properly in the last 2 months. And in before the last 2 months, I would say 90% of my time is spent on YouTube. 95. I haven't posted in my Instagram up until 2 months ago for I'll say maybe a year. So I've sort of almost given up my Instagram account other than like posting stories here and there of something that like inspires me, book I'm reading, etc. But then 2 months ago, I sort of started picking up doing Instagram reels again because um of my job. Like I want to post consulting content, and sometimes I don't have enough time to make it into a full YouTube video. So I started doing reels, and then like a few of them started doing really good. Now, like my growth on Instagram is a lot quicker than on YouTube. So I think 2 months ago it was on sitting on like 100 or 200 followers, and today is on like 2.5K. So I've gained like 2,000 followers in like 2 months. And so like right now I'm putting more effort into Instagram almost, but I don't want to give up YouTube as well. So it's always a battle. But right now I'll say the ratio is almost like 50-50.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So when you think about how you're going to create reels or short-term videos, I think as you mentioned earlier, it's it's faster, it takes less time, it takes a little bit less effort than a full YouTube video. Um, do you have a different process for reels? Like, we'd love to hear what are some differences in the
Yeah,
process of filming a
I
reel
think
versus a video.
yeah. The process is vastly different now, say. So as I mentioned, when I make a YouTube, the whole process stretches out to a week, right? So maybe I script and film Monday to Friday and do my editing and posting on Sunday, Saturday and Sunday. But for Reels, at the moment I'm still experimenting, but for the last 2 months, what I've been doing is just from filming to posting on this, it's just all on the same day. So in the morning, for example, if it's a day in the life of a management consultant type content, I'll film throughout the day, like 9 a.m. to whatever time it finishes.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the evening when I get home, I'll do the editing and the posting. But I know that this is probably not the ideal schedule. I've been speaking to like other creators. One of my crew, like my creator friend from Hong Kong actually, who's sitting on something ridiculous like 20, 30K followers. What he does on Reels is that he films everything from Monday to Friday and then batch edit them on the weekends. And that is something that I've been thinking about doing as well. But I still haven't really figured out how often I want to post on Instagram. I think his method probably works if you are posting 3 to 5 times a week. At the moment, I'm still just like keeping my bar low, doing like once a week because I don't want to burn myself out.
Yeah.
So at the moment, like doing my editing and posting on the same day still sort of makes sense, especially on the days that work relatively chill.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, do you have a favorite video or favorite reel?
Favorite reel? You know what? Actually, no. I think I like all of them. If I'm being honest, I like all of them, all of the ones that I've done since 2 months ago, like all of the consulting ones. I think they're quite punchy. The content is quite interesting, and that's one reason why I do content creation. Right? It's almost like to romanticize your life because if you're
Mhm.
just living your life day to day, it can often feel very boring and quite routiney. But then when you edit them into like a short form content, you're almost looking at yourself from a third person point of view.
Mm.
It makes me quite grateful for where I am, what I'm doing at the moment. It makes me think that, hey, my life actually quite cool. It's not that bad. So yeah, I'll say I like all of the content that I'm making at the moment, which is quite good.
It's kind of tying to what I was thinking, like the law of average. It's like a lot of the systems in place are designed to satisfy and suit most people's needs. If you don't actively deviate your path with like other initiatives or other goals that you have, you would naturally conform to the average. I did I explain it well? Like, what did you think of it?
I think, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that idea. I think if you want above average results, you can't take you have to take above average actions.
I'm curious, like, do you have like a mental or like do you have some mental principles or like a mantra that you live with?
Do I won't say like doing self I won't say like doing self development because like that's kind of cringy, but like I've been doing self development since I was like 16, and I think there's quite a lot there's quite a lot of stuff that I've taken in and absorbed and became part of myself without me really like consciously thinking about it. I've sort of just internalized it. So
Mm-hmm.
I won't really say there's like one key principle or like any mantra that I live by because I feel like life is too multifaceted. You can't just pinpoint down one principle and say you live your life by that because it really depends on the context, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, you want to be a patient person, but you also want to be a flexible person. And that really depends on what context you're speaking about and what situation you're in. So, yeah, I won't really say there's like one mantra that I live by.
Okay, okay. And maybe I want to tie back to the way you said romanticizing your life, and making video is just like one great way to document it, and also doing that. Like, what has been like your favorite part to romanticize about?
I think the favorite part to romanticize about my own life is really just a day to day routine because that's the part where you can often feel like the name suggests, right? It's a routine, so it can feel quite boring and repetitive. But like when you romanticize it, you realize that, oh hey, this was actually all I ever wanted 3 years ago, right? Like to become a management consultant, to be working in London. I'm like, wow, that's all I ever wanted 3 years ago. And once you make it into a piece of content and look at it from like a third person point of view, you're like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. So I'll say that's definitely like my favorite part, to romanticize the day to day aspect of your life.
Have you ever like looked back to your university videos and be like, oh, that was me in university?
Yeah, I've tried watching like my super old content, but they're just so cringy. I can't. Everything from like the way I was speaking, my hair, the lighting, everything was just it was horrible. I can't watch it more than 5 seconds. But I hope that but that means it's good, right? Because if you cringe at your old self, that means you've improved. And I hope
Mm.
that like myself from 3 years down the line will look at what I'm doing right now and cringe as well, because that meant I've grown.
Absolutely. That's so awesome. And your content and your brand has also changed over the past few years too, right? Because at the beginning, you're making videos for aspiring university students about your university times, and now you're making more content on the life of being a management consultant, strategy management consultant, and to guide people and just paint a picture of what that really looks like for people who are exploring different paths in their careers, right? I what has been some of the best things that have come out of your content?
I think one of the best things that have came out of doing content is like the people that I meet. So for example, like we sort of met through doing content, and that's like super cool because we have like a mutual friend, like he was like your childhood friend or something, and he went to college with me. He was my flatmate. So like it's super cool to be meeting people on the internet, I think. So for example, there's another guy who's also a YouTuber who's based in London, and like he reached out to me because he saw one of my consulting content, and like he really resonated with me, and we met up for food, etc. I feel like this is one of the coolest things that you can get out of doing content creation, really.
Are there any short-term or long-term goals that you have with the channel or with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's always like a number goal that you're trying to hit, right? Like, for example, I'm on YouTube on like 1 point something K. I definitely want to hit like 10K sometime soon. I don't know when. And Instagram, similar story. Like, Instagram's growing a lot faster. I'm hoping to get to 10K probably in the next few months, if possible, and maybe like 50K in like a year time. So that would be amazing. I also know that you can't just have these number goals. You also have to, because like these number goals makes it very result oriented. You also have to have something that's more like soft slash qualitative. So I guess in terms of that aspect of things, my goal is just to keep improving on the content that I make, and also maybe like narrow down a bit more specifically my style of content and like the niche that I'm playing in. Because even though I still make a lot of consulting content, sometimes I still want to make more lifestyle slash like just stay in the lifestyle type content as well. So just to like have more clarity over that as well.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. And in the spare time, like outside of working, outside of making videos, and I'm sure there are a lot on your plate already with videos and work. And you also love like picking up books, like what kind of books were you initially into, and how has that changed?
Oh, really good question as well. So I would say I really started reading again when I'm like 16. So I said again because when I used to read a lot when I was very young, but I kind of stopped that and sort of was a bit detached from it until I was 16. So I really only count like anything after 16. So when I was 16, what really got me into reading was, like I said, like self improvement stuff. So I was reading a lot of like Jordan Peterson. I know he's like not he doesn't have a good rep right now, but like I feel like back then, like when I was 16, like his book was really, really good. It was really eye opening. So I read a lot of self improvement, self development type content type book when I was like 16 to 18. So stuff like, Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, and then like Mark Manson, the subtle art of not giving a fuck. And then that type of content, I was reading quite a bit of that. And then when I was 18, started reading more like businessy, entrepreneurial type content. So for example, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is I guess more of like a finance book. It's more like a personal finance one. Rich Dad
Mhm.
Poor Dad, 4 Hour Work Week, like I mentioned. Also some like more startup ebook like 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which was really good as well. And nowadays, I just read all kinds of stuff. Really, I've started picking up like literature and fiction again because I feel like that part of my life has been lacking for a bit. So I was reading some Murakami for a bit, George Orwell, etc. And also just random stuff like, like meditation, like Marcus Aurelius, like everyone reads that. And I think it's a really fantastic book. And then also like books related to my job. For example, I'm reading this book called Barbarians at the Gate, which is about one of the largest private equity buyout in America in the 80s. I try to read like a broad range of stuff because I don't want to pigeonhole myself into like into only having one type of knowledge because, like I don't know, to a construction worker that has a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And you don't want to be that person. You want to be a person that's like multidisciplinary. Yeah.
I see. That's super cool. And given that much variety of the books, and also given how much time that you spend reading, you actually have a little system on Notion where you like wrote down every single book. It's like a little book review on its own, into that little Notion page. Like, what does that look like, and how does it work for you?
Yeah. So that system started when I was maybe 18, 19. So
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, it was an ego thing, I would say, because you want to track how many books you're reading this year. You want to like have a list, a rank of like, oh, these are all the books I've read. So what it entails really is a page for every single book. The title of the page will be like the book title, a ranking that gives it, and then maybe sometimes source. So for example, where I heard about the book, it could be like I heard about it through a friend. I heard about it through a podcast I was listening to. I heard it through a YouTube video I was watching, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
inside every page of that book will be the book notes that I take. So that when I'm reading, I try to take notes of like the key points, etc. But obviously not too extensive because I also want to just focus on reading, not just like copying down everything that I
Yep.
read. So that's mainly the system. Actually, nowadays I don't update it as regularly because, as I mentioned, I think it was an ego thing. I was trying to like read as many books as I can back then. I almost feel it as like a numbers game, but now I've sort of grown more comfortable in myself. I can just like pick up a book, read it, and if I don't like it, I'll like drop it for a bit and start a different one.
Mm,
So like that Notion page, I still update, but like just not as frequent as before. Where before I would literally pick up a book, finish it before starting another one. Now I could be having like 4 or 5 books that I've started and are in different progress.
I see. So the purpose, of the Notion page has changed. It's less of like a like rushing to count, like seeing as a numbers game, but more sort of like as a way just to document like your reading experience so that later you can always like reflect and look back into it. Absolutely. And for audience who might be interested in like starting to read, like if you have any advice on how people can get started reading and get good at reading to get the most out of reading, like what are some of the things that you would say?
Yeah. So a few things. First of all, start small. So if you read something like Atomic Habits, you know that you sometimes just need that 1% improvement. So it's not about like reading for 3 hours one day and then not reading again until like 6 months later. It's more about like reading a little bit and reading a little bit and the amount that you can repeat every single day. So I'll use like myself as a personal example. When I was 16, I haven't been reading at all for like the last 5 years. So how I started was just choosing a specific time, a specific place, and a specific amount of pages to read every single day. So what I would do, I still remember quite clearly, I would wake up 15 minutes earlier before school. And then every morning after I brush my teeth, maybe like do my meditation, because I sometimes do meditation. After I read after I brush my teeth, after I do my meditation, and then I would sit down to read whatever book I'm reading for like 5 minutes. That's literally like my reading habit when I first started. I did that for a while. Once I got like really comfortable at it, I bumped that up to like 10 minutes and then to like 15 minutes until it sort of like becomes a habit, right? Because once it becomes a habit, you sort of just do it. You won't really question it because you won't really question whether you want to brush your teeth today, right? Because you just do it. It's a part of your habit. Same as reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm also quite curious, like not in content, not in career in general, but what do you think like a successful life look like?
You tell me. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think like maybe we should all strive for fulfillment. I guess what I know, I may not know what a successful life look like, but I know what it doesn't look like. I think what it
Mm,
doesn't look like is a life without anyone close to you, like without family, without friends. An unsuccessful life is one that you've worked your whole life for money only. Yeah, a unsuccessful life is one that like you've lived in autopilot your whole life, just doing whatever you think you're expected to do and never did anything you wanted yourself. So yeah,
mm,
maybe like I can't really answer what a successful life is, but I guess I know what a unsuccessful one is and what to avoid.
that's really interesting because never really heard of that answer before. That's my first time hearing it. And it's similar. I think I approach when someone asks me like, "Oh, what happiness look like?" It's like similar, right? Like I think like happiness can be described as like the absence of sadness. So
Yeah.
like when you're not sad, I would say like I'm pretty satisfied. But obviously there are times gonna be sad, right? But then if people ask me like what does happiness look like, then yeah, it could just be the absence of sadness. So
Yeah, no, I actually resonate with that quite a bit because when you think of the word happiness, you think of like being elevated, being really hyped, but like it's not
mm-hmm.
really that. It's more like being being peaceful, being like comfortable with where you are and being like happy with what you have at the moment. So I guess it does look more like absence of sadness rather than like being elevated almost.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. What is the nicest thing someone has done to you?
That's a really hard one. Most recently, probably just like when people look at my content and they send me like DMs where they're like, "This is like super helpful. I'm so glad you made this, etc." Not like one specific comment that I can pinpoint, but like this type of comment and like DMs always like makes me really happy about what I'm doing.
Like just people out of nowhere from the most unexpected places and they're just messaging you as like, oh, like Jason, like I watch your content, like this been so helpful, like now I'm applying to consulting, like things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that always makes me like feel like I've made an impact, which is like one reason why you want to do content, right? You want to make an impact, you want to bring value to the audience.
Hmm. What I guess to wrap this off when I ask something interesting, um how would what would you say your friends would describe you versus like what your audience would describe you?
I've never thought about this, but let's break it down one by one. What would my friend describe me? I think they'll say that I'm quite funny. I think I'm quite funny. Like not just like the things that I say, but also like the way that I act. Like I'm quite I'm quite random. I'm quite high energy. I'm quite funny. But they'll also say that I'm really organized and structured, which I do think I am. Like I like my routines. I like having things in place. I like having like my Notion pages for books I read. So that's how my friends would describe me. How my audience would describe me is a bit harder because I feel like I don't actually have one specific type of audience yet. But like let's just say like my consulting type audience. I guess they'll just say that I'm quite chill because I get the comment quite a bit actually on YouTube. But when people when people watch my like consulting content, like oddly they'll always say that, oh, this is so chill, this is so peaceful. I love this. I'm like, the point is not to be chill, but like maybe I'm chill. So like they'll say I'm chill, but they'll probably also say like I'm successful in a weird sense because I guess people watching my content will be people that want to break into consulting. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe they will have like this perception of, wow, this is super cool. This guy's made it. He's where I am. He's where I want to be in the future, etc. So I guess that's what they'll say. They'll say like, this guy's like chill, but also like successful and wants to be where he is right now.
Do you feel any imposter syndrome out of this?
Yeah, definitely. And this is quite interesting as well because a lot of people in my office knows that I do content creation. I've actually been told literally like 1 week, 2 weeks into the job that some people, I don't know who, some people in the office recognize me because they've seen my content before I joined the firm, which is like cool but also terrifying because you don't know what they've seen, and I was afraid that I said something I shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And linking back to imposter syndrome, now that I'm making content more seriously, consulting content more seriously, I sometimes feel imposter syndrome in terms of like, I may seem like an expert to the audience, but like, imagine if my manager or like my director is watching my stuff. He's like, what does this guy know about consulting? He's been here for 6 months only. So I definitely get that imposter syndrome in terms of content creation, but also in terms of job, obviously, because in consulting, you're working with super smart people, super well spoken, very well presented. So definitely like imposter syndrome almost every single day.
Damn, that's that's the reality. That's the reality you have to live with it. Like it's not like you can overcome it because at the end of the day, like you will still be working in a job and those dynamics would always exist, like no matter how long you have been in the job, right?
Yeah, I think there's two things, right? First of all, you can't always overcome it, but you can always manage it. So you can always keep it in check. Just to know that like this, like imposter syndrome happens to everyone, and just to know that you're not actually worse than everyone else. And secondly, I'll even argue that maybe it's good because if you have imposter syndrome, it means that you're not being complacent, you're actually doing stuff maybe slightly outside of your comfort zone, which means you're growing. So I'll argue that maybe sometimes even good for you.
It's like a symptom for good things that are happening.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm, nice, nice. I like the way you said it. Okay. I wanted to ask one last question. What do you want to be known for?
But in like the short term or like, I don't know, in my lifetime,
Let's say in your lifetime.
damn, these questions are deep, man. In my lifetime, I want to be known for a nice person. I'll say first and foremost. Like, doesn't matter what I do, I want to be a nice person. I want to be a person that has changed how people think about their life and maybe the life path that they have chose to go into because of like how I know the content I consume online have made me change my life path. For example, from law into consulting, and then maybe like from doing nothing to like doing content creation. I want to have the same impact that I've had, and I want to be able to bring that impact to other people as well. So yeah, I guess like a nice person, a person that has an impact on how you decided to plan your life. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If you have to give our audience who's tuning in right now like a little challenge, is
Yeah.
there anything top of mind?
I think that depends on the audience. If the audience is like an aspiring content creator, I'll say to them like just try pick up your phone, record yourself talking about something that you're really passionate about for 5 minutes, and then like privately post it on YouTube. You don't have to put it publicly, but like just privately post it. And then throughout that process, just very closely monitor how you're feeling and monitor like what's making you stop from posting content in the first place. Because like just from doing the exercise, you realize that there's a lot of fear that is unfounded, a lot of fear that is illogical. And I feel like that challenge really makes you more aware of where you're coming from, what your fears are, and that probably can help you get into like your content creation phase if you haven't already been making content.
Sweet, sweet. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time hopping onto this podcast.